You're not going anywhere. This trip is only for real family." My daughter-in-law spoke softly but sharp enough to slice through the airport PA. She picked up a pen, crossed my name off the passenger list, and handed the paper to the agent like she'd just finished clearing away an old item. My son stood right there, hands in his pockets, eyes glued to the cold tile floor. Not a glance, not a word in my defense, just silence, the kind that tells you you're no longer counted as part of their life. I gripped my bag strap, feeling my heartbeat stumble under the boarding now announcement. I swallowed my tears and unlocked my phone. "All right," I whispered, my finger sliding across the screen. "In 5 minutes, when the captain's voice comes on, they'll learn who really doesn't belong on this trip. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further." My name is Gloria Avery, 64 years old, living in Seattle, Washington. For most of my life, I was a woman who believed kindness could fix everything: family rifts, cold dinners, even silence. I spent decades being the peacekeeper, the one who gave, explained, forgave. But age has a strange honesty to it. It strips you bare until all that's left is what you truly stand for. And on the day my own children erased me from their trip, I finally remembered I wasn't born to be tolerated. I was born to be heard. That morning, Seattle-Tacoma Airport was packed. Cold white light fell over rows of metal seats and bounced off the wide glass where planes were taxiing. I stood in the crowd, feeling like I was floating between two worlds. On one side, the buzz of people getting ready for vacation. On the other, the empty space inside me, quiet and raw. Savannah, my daughter-in-law, didn't bother looking at me when she spoke to the counter agent. Changed the traveler's name. "Maria Cole, here's her passport info." She said it crisp and confident, voice cold as metal. I watched the boarding pass in my hand get pulled away and replaced with a new ticket stamped with a bold Maria Cole, a person I didn't even know. I looked at Michael, my only son. He's 38 now, successful, drives a silver Tesla, lives in a 2-story house out in Bellevue, but right then he stood there like a lost boy, only he wasn't looking for me anymore. "Michael," I said, barely above a whisper only he could hear, "you know this is wrong." He glanced at me, then looked away. "Mom, please understand us. You shouldn't fly that far. This trip will wear you out. We just want you to rest." I gave a thin smile. "I'm not tired, Michael. I'm just disappointed." Savannah cleared her throat, lips a dry red like a wilting petal. "Let's not make a scene here, Mom. People are watching." She bent down, adjusted the strap on her designer bag, then spoke in a sugary tone sharp enough to sting. "You can stay home and rest. Water the orchids. This trip really isn't appropriate for your age. Lots of activities, lots of moving around, you know. Not appropriate for your age" felt like a pair of shears cutting the last thread tying me to my self-respect. I looked around and saw people still laughing, carrying kids, pulling suitcases, hugging goodbye. No one noticed a woman being stripped of her right to exist by a few light words from her own family. I stood still, feeling the air around me thicken. For a second I swore I heard my heart crack. Not because I was cut out of the trip, but because the child I raised chose to do nothing. Indifference sometimes is crueler than an insult. I took a deep breath. The smell of roasted coffee from the nearby Starbucks slipped into my lungs. It pulled up mornings when I woke early to brew coffee for Michael when he was a broke college kid, before credit cards, before a pretty wife or a big house. I remembered our tiny kitchen, his warm hands on my shoulders when he said, "I'll take you everywhere, Mom." And now, here I was, at the threshold of that everywhere with no room for me. I swallowed my tears. No, I wouldn't cry here, not in front of Savannah, not in front of Michael, not under anyone's pitying stare. I quietly turned and stepped aside. I opened my purse and took out my phone. On the screen, the Sky Harbor app appeared, a little icon I'd hidden in a private folder Michael didn't even know existed. I tapped it. 3 years ago, after my husband Thomas passed, I found something he'd left me, something I still hesitate to call an asset. Thomas was an aerospace engineer who worked over 40 years at Sky Harbor Airways. I always thought he was just mid-level management. But in a bank safe, next to the death certificate, was a file proving I owned the controlling stake in Sky Harbor, the second largest private airline on the West Coast. Thomas had written in a letter, "If the day comes when someone treats you small, remember, you don't need anyone to grant you a seat. You own the plane." I never thought I'd use it, until now. My finger slid across the screen. An icon lit up. "Contact Victor Lang, CEO, Sky Harbor." An automatic prompt popped up. "Protocol A12 initiated. Confirm owner identity?" I pressed yes. My heart pounded so hard I could almost hear it. A soft tone sounded, "Verification successful." I looked out at the runway where sunlight glinted off the fuselage bearing the Sky Harbor logo, my airline. Irony, I thought. They're about to fly on my plane, be served by my employees, sip champagne bought with my dividends, and still believe I'm their burden. I sat at a window seat near the gate and watched lines of people file through. A blonde little girl laughed as her dad lifted her and kissed her mom's cheek. The sight cinched my chest. I used to have a Michael like that, a boy who ran toward me, eyes bright, shouting, "Mom," whenever I showed up at the school gate. I wondered when that boy turned into a man who couldn't meet his mother's eyes. Savannah tugged Michael's arm, her voice low but ruling. "Let's go, boarding." Michael looked back. His eyes skimmed over me for a second. A quick, heavy look that felt like an apology too thin to say out loud. I didn't respond. I just nodded. As they walked through the gate, the PA chimed. "Passengers on Sky Harbor Flight 218 to Maui, please prepare for departure." I watched the plane roll toward the runway, and in my chest, the heat of pain cooled into something cold and clear. Like ice, but no longer weak. I reopened the app and saw Victor had replied, "We received the signal. Would you like a special announcement on flight SH218, Mrs. Avery?" I smiled to myself. "Yes, Victor. Let the captain know the owner of Sky Harbor is monitoring that flight, and I'd like to send my greetings to 3 very special passengers." I set the phone down and leaned back. Outside, the engines rumbled. Light flashed across the glass. I looked at my reflection in the window, a 64-year-old woman's face, tired, but with a surprisingly calm gaze. Some moments don't need a loud comeback, just a quiet smile and a reversal already lifting into the sky. As the plane took off, I whispered inside, "Thomas, do you see? I'm still here." And this time, they won't forget my name. 3 weeks before that airport morning, I truly believed my life was turning a page. I remember it was a Friday afternoon. Outside, Seattle drizzled. Drops slid down the window frame, reflecting the soft yellow from the desk lamp I turn on when I read. I was making a cup of chamomile tea when the phone rang. Michael's name lit up. My heart dipped. He doesn't call unless it's important. "Mom," he said, unusually upbeat. "Savannah and I are planning a family vacation, this time with you. We want you to come." I froze for a few seconds, hardly believing it. "Really, Michael? After all these years?" He laughed on the line. "Really? Maui? Ocean? Sun? A resort? You need to get out a bit. I want you to be happy." That sentence tightened my throat. It had been so long since Michael said he wanted me to be happy. I answered, voice trembling, "I'd love to go." "Thank you. Thank you." When the call ended, I stood there, phone to my chest, tears falling without me noticing. Outside, the drizzle kept up, but inside me warmth spread like sunlight. I set down the tea, opened the closet, and pulled the old suitcase from the attic. The blue case was dusty from the last trip Thomas and I took to Alaska almost 10 years ago. I brushed it off and smiled. "We're going again, Thomas." That night I went online to find cushioned walking shoes with soft soles so my heels wouldn't ache. I read a stack of reviews, chose the white pair, and added a tropical print silk scarf to the cart. I pictured myself walking on the beach, hair lifting in the breeze, Michael smiling, Savannah chatting. It all felt so peaceful. The next day, a text came from Savannah. Even written, her tone carried that cool, flat note. "Mom, before we go, could you help water the balcony plants and keep an eye on a few packages? I'm worried deliveries might get lost. Thanks in advance." I reread it a few times. "Before we go?" I smiled, slightly confused. I'd be going with them, not staying behind. Then I told myself she probably misspoke. I didn't want to think poorly. I didn't want to pop this fragile bubble of joy. I replied gently, "Sure, I'll help. But please send me the departure time so I can pack accordingly." The chat only showed seen. No reply. I soothed myself. She's probably busy. I'm always looking for reasons to feel lighter. That's a habit of mothers who've loved too much. The next day I bought a coral sundress. The clerk said the color suited my skin and made me look younger. I believed her. I snapped a photo and put it in the family group. Savannah replied with just 2 words. "Looks nice." No emoji, no compliment. And Michael didn't reply at all. A small emptiness slipped in. Then I found another reason. He's in a meeting. Savannah's busy planning. I chose to trust like I always do. In the days after, I kept preparing. I stopped by the pharmacy for vitamins and motion sickness meds, sorted everything into small bags. I picked up little gifts. A bergamot perfume for Savannah, a linen shirt for Michael, a Hawaiian doll for my granddaughter Lily. I wanted everyone happy so this trip wouldn't have any distance. One afternoon I visited my best friend June Park, Korean, widowed like me. When I told her about the trip, her eyes narrowed a bit. "Did Savannah call to invite you herself?" "No, Michael did." "Has she said anything to you since?" "I did get a text asking me to water plants and sign for packages, but maybe it was a mix-up." June shook her head and put a hand on my shoulder. "Gloria, listen. Savannah's always trying to control everything around Michael, including you. She's redefining family in a way that edges you out, and you don't see it yet." I went quiet. I knew she might be right, but I didn't want to believe it. I'd lived too long with distance. Now that a tiny door had opened, I wanted to step through, even if it might be a trap. "I think she's changed," I said softly. June sighed. "I hope so." That night I sat on my bed and replayed Michael's message, this time with you. I listened over and over, smiling. One sentence was enough to make me forget every doubt. I wanted to believe my son was still that little boy just influenced by his wife. A mother always wants to believe the best, even when her heart already knows the truth. I texted Michael again. "Please remind me of the flight time so I can book a taxi early. I'm excited." Message sent. No read receipt. A day passed. Then 2. Still nothing. On the 3rd evening, Savannah called. Her voice was even and felt like she was reading notes. "Hey, Mom, the trip's all set." I emailed the itinerary. "Please check." I asked, "What time do we fly?" "I'll send the details later. Oh, and could you sign for an Amazon package tomorrow? I put your name down as the recipient." I smiled tight. "All right, Savannah. Thanks, you're the best." Her voice as sweet as honey to mask the bitter. I set the phone down and looked around the quiet house. I've spent my life making this place a home for family, yet more and more I felt like a tenant. Even so, I wouldn't think the worst. I kept getting ready. 2 weeks before the trip, I set the suitcase out in the sun and packed everything carefully. I went to the salon, trimmed the dry ends, and dyed my hair. Chestnut Thomas used to say that color made me look like afternoon tea. That day, I stood before the mirror and saw myself smile, truly, for the first time in years. I believed things would be good. I believed Michael would hold my hand like he used to. I believed Savannah might learn to be kind. I even wrote a small card. "Thank you for letting me come. Love, Mom," planning to leave it on the resort table when we arrived. The night before departure, I barely slept. I repacked for the third time and added some homemade oatmeal cookies, Michael's favorite. I listened to the rain on the awning and felt full of hope. I remember whispering to myself before lights out, "Tomorrow, Gloria. At last, your son needs you again." I had no idea that the next morning at gate B12, "You're not going anywhere," would stamp the end of that belief and mark the beginning of a different person inside me who hadn't been awake for 64 years. I woke up at 5 a.m. that day, before the alarm. Seattle was still dim, mist thick like a curtain. I flipped on the kitchen light and brewed coffee. The smell filled the empty house. Everything was ready from the night before: suitcase by the door, passport in my purse, e-ticket printed, brand new white shoes waiting to walk. I looked around the kitchen and murmured, "Thomas, we're finally going to see the ocean with our son." At 7 a.m., I called a taxi. The young driver opened the door and said cheerfully, "Airport, ma'am? Heading on vacation? You look excited." I smiled, trying to hide my nerves. Yes, a vacation, with family. The sky was dull that day, neither sunny nor rainy. Gray draped over everything, from the wet streets to the car window, reflecting my face, the face of a 64-year-old woman trying to believe she still had a place in her own child's story. When I got to Seattle-Tacoma, I was almost an hour early. I like being early, always have, so I can breathe, watch people, and imagine the destination. I rolled my suitcase to Sky Harbor check-in. White lights gleamed off the polished floor. The PA read names in a steady rhythm. I stood there, my heart a mix of nerves and joy, picturing our first evening in Maui, a family dinner, waves talking, Michael laughing through a story, Savannah pouring wine, and me sitting quietly, happy just to be near them. I was daydreaming when I saw them. Savannah walked in, first knee-length white dress, cream linen jacket, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. Her hair was pulled up high, strands catching the airport lights. She carried herself like someone about to board a private yacht, not a commercial flight. Beside her was Michael, pulling a black suitcase, khakis, and an ocean blue polo. When he saw me, Michael flinched, then forced a smile. "Mom, you're early." "Of course," I said. "I don't want to miss the flight." Savannah gave me a quick up-and-down glance, a thin smile on her lips. "You look cute, Mom. Like a real tourist." I couldn't tell if that was a compliment or a jab. I just smiled, about to say something. When Savannah turned to the check-in agent, "Excuse me, I need to reconfirm the passenger list for flight SH-218 to Maui. Savannah Avery, Michael Avery, and Maria Cole." I heard every word, especially the last name Maria Cole. I frowned. "Savannah, who is Maria Cole?" She still didn't look at me, answering flatly, "My aunt. She's coming with us." I gave a small, confused laugh. "And me? Wasn't I on this trip?" Savannah turned, the smile gone. "Mom, I think you misunderstood. Aunt Cole needs a break, and the resort in Maui has limited rooms. So, you understand." Her voice was honeyed but freezing. Michael jumped in, voice small and choppy. "Mom, actually this trip has a lot of activities. Hiking, boating, lots of moving around. If you came, you'd probably be exhausted. So, we thought it'd be better if you stayed home." I turned to my son. His eyes dodged mine, sliding away like someone afraid of being seen. I kept my voice steady. Since when am I no longer your family? No one answered. All I heard was the ticket printer chattering. The agent handed Savannah a sheet of paper, professional tone. Here's Miss Cole's new ticket. The old name will be canceled. Savannah took it and nodded. Thanks, that was quick. She turned to Michael. Let's go. They're about to start boarding. I watched it all like I was seeing myself erased from their lives, one simple black strike of ink turning me into a stranger. I stepped back against a column, trying to hide my burning face. People streamed by, suitcase wheels, chatter, laughter. No one knew a mother had just been cut from the trip she'd counted down the days for. Michael came over, voice low. Please don't be upset, Mom, okay? Savannah just worries you'll be tired. I'll take you on another trip. I looked at him, the grown man I once soothed after a bike fall, the boy I carried on my shoulders through first snow days. You make it sound like I'm a burden. He said nothing. The silence stretched until it smothered. Savannah called out, sharp. Michael, hurry up, they're boarding. He nodded, then walked away without another word. I stood there listening to her heels strike the floor, each sharp step like the tapping of a verdict. Their shadows disappeared behind the glass doors where other passengers lined up for scanning. I sat down and with shaking hands, opened my purse. Part of me wanted to cry. The other part felt so hollow I couldn't feel anything at all. June's words rang in my head. Savannah is redefining family to cut you out. Now I understood. She wasn't just cutting me from a trip. She wanted me out of my son's life. I leaned back and closed my eyes. Thomas's face came to me, the man who once told me, if anyone tries to make you forget your worth, remember who you are. I exhaled, and in that moment everything cleared. I didn't feel ashamed. I didn't feel humiliated. Instead, a cool, steady light moved through my veins. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My fingers slid to the Sky Harbor app Thomas had set up special access for me, something I never thought I'd have to use. On the screen, owner channel Victor Lang. I tapped it. The screen buzzed. A chat window opened. I typed, Activate Protocol A12. 3 seconds later, a reply. Received. Confirm owner identity. Gloria Avery? I hit confirm. My heart thumped hard. Not from fear. For the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life. I put the phone away, stood up, and stepped out of the crowd. I walked slowly, not rushing, rolling my suitcase lightly. No one looked at me, and I didn't care anymore. I've lived my whole life making everyone comfortable today. I chose not to please anyone. I found a quiet corner by a big window, sat, and looked out at the runway. A Sky Harbor plane sat waiting. I knew it was flight. SH-218 to Maui, their flight. Light bounced off the glass and fell across my face. I smiled for the first time since I walked in. A quiet smile, no sadness, just certainty. I took a sip of water, drew a breath, and said softly to myself, Okay, Gloria. From now on, you're not the invited. You're the one who gives the orders. When the speakers announced the upcoming departure, I knew the game had begun. But unlike what they thought, this board belonged to me. I remember Thomas's last afternoon like it was yesterday. Rare Seattle sunlight tilted through our bedroom window, laying a honey-warm glow over his silver hair. He held my hand, hands tanned by a lifetime with metal, now dry and light as a leaf. You'll be okay if I go first, he said, voice rough but firm. I know you're stronger than you think. I laughed and wiped my tears. How can I be strong without you? He just shook his head. You'll see. I've set everything up, just wait for the right time. It was the last time I heard his voice. 3 days later, he passed in his sleep. No struggle, no pain, like he'd simply stepped into another room. After the funeral, when everyone had gone, I sat back at our table and stared at the empty chair. For 42 years, Thomas sat there, ate dinner, told shop floor stories, and grumbled that I put too much sugar in his coffee. The house without him felt impossibly hollow. I sat there until late. Then a knock at the door. The mail carrier, with a brown envelope, no return address. The handwriting made my heart seize. "For Gloria, open when you're ready." I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a small note in Thomas's tidy, right-leaning script. "If one day you feel belittled, pushed away from the table, open safe number 218 at Union First Bank. The code is our wedding date. And remember, Gloria, sometimes, to be respected, you have to remind them who bought the table." Under the note was a blessed metal card engraved with my name and another line, "Sky Harbor, a 12. I had no idea what it meant, figured it was some savings account Thomas left. 3 days later, I went to the bank. The manager recognized Thomas's name and took me to a private room. The small safe clicked open. Inside wasn't cash or jewelry, but a thick file and another envelope. I opened the second letter longer, detailed, in his own hand. "My dear Gloria, if you're reading this, I'm likely gone. I know you don't care about wealth, but I need you to understand. I quietly built a foundation so you'd never have to bow your head. In 40 years at Sky Harbor Airways, I wasn't just a maintenance engineer. I began buying shares back in the 80s and gradually became a controlling shareholder. I kept it secret because I didn't want Michael to know and live off it. He needs to learn to stand on his own. All ownership has been transferred to you, the only person I trust. You'll find confirmations, powers of attorney, and a direct line to the CEO, Victor Lang. I asked them to set up an emergency protocol. A 12. When you trigger it, they'll know you want to assert control or intervene in any Sky Harbor operation. I don't know when you'll need it, but I believe someday, when someone forgets your value, you'll remember this. With all my love, Thomas." I sat frozen for a long time after reading. It felt unreal. Thomas, the simple man in worn shirts who drove a 20-year-old pickup, was the controlling shareholder of one of the biggest airlines in the West. I flipped through the file. Stock transfers, POAs, asset lists, notarized signatures, all legitimate, clear. At the end was Victor Lang's business card with a note. "Call for verification," I dialed. A calm, deep voice answered. "Hello, Mrs. Avery. I was told if you called, it means the time has come." We arranged a private meeting at Sky Harbor a week later. I'll never forget it. Victor, about 50, tall, sharp-eyed, respectful, handed me a packet. "Everything Mr. Thomas said is true. You hold 51%. From now on, Sky Harbor is under your control." I blurted, almost panicked. "I don't know anything about running an airline." Victor smiled. "He knew that, ma'am. He also knew real power isn't in day-to-day operations, it's in knowing when to speak." I went home half-dazed. It felt like Thomas was still here, guiding me. I started reading. Not like a curious widow, but like someone learning her husband's second life. I learned basics, shares, powers of attorney, financials. Every night I read until my eyes burned. I wanted to understand the world he'd kept quiet so I could stand firm when needed. A month later, Victor came to my house. We sat in the living room beneath our wedding photo. He re-verified ownership with updated papers and set up a senior owner app. It let me track flights in real time, check routes, and most importantly, contact leadership anytime. I asked, "Why did Thomas hide this for so many years?" Victor said, "He told me something special. Gloria should know only when she needs to know. When she's pushed from the table, she'll realize she can buy the whole restaurant." I laughed, equal parts sad and proud. That was Thomas' light words carrying a long plan. From then on, I kept quiet. I didn't tell Michael, and certainly not Savannah. I lived the same: pension, groceries, orchids, church. Everyone assumed I was a middle-class widow. I didn't correct them. Maybe Thomas wanted me hidden so they'd show who they are before I answered. I didn't flaunt or spend. My checking account looked modest, but whenever I opened the Sky Harbor app and saw 7-figure lines move, I remembered Thomas's words. "Power isn't the money. It's your silence until the right moment." Sometimes Victor sent reports. revenue, new routes, dividends. I didn't meddle. I watched and waited. Now and then, chatting with June, I'd half joke, "If someone disrespects me, I'll buy the airport." June would laugh. "No need to buy it, Gloria. Just let them know who owns the runway." That line stayed with me for months. I started to change, not richer, but more certain, calmer. I no longer feared being forgotten because I knew my existence was tied to something they couldn't touch. And then this morning, in Seattle's airport, when Savannah coolly struck my name and Michael stared at the floor, I realized the right time Thomas spoke of had arrived. His whole life had been preparing me for this second. When I typed "Activate Protocol at 12, I wasn't just triggering legal authority. I was opening the legacy of a man who foresaw a future where I'd need to remind the world, Gloria Avery isn't dependent, she holds the wings of the very sky they're flying through. I watched Sky Harbor Flight SH-218 get ready to taxi. Every wheel turn, every engine note felt like Thomas smiling from somewhere. "You were right," I whispered. Now it's my turn. I sat back in the airport lounge, phone in my hand. On the other end, Victor Lang replied in under 2 minutes. Confirmed. Sky Harbor Flight 218 to Maui, departure at 10:25. Passengers, Michael Avery, Savannah Avery, and Maria Cole. I read the message, my heartbeat slow and steady. Every piece clicked into place just as Thomas had foreseen. I typed, "Activate special greeting." Victor replied almost instantly, "Which template would you like, Mrs. Avery?" I typed each word like a statement. "Sky Harbor warmly welcomes Mrs. Gloria Avery, owner of the airline. We are proud to serve you today." A short greeting, one PA system, and the whole sky shifted. I didn't need to shout, didn't need to cry, I just needed them to hear who truly owns this sky. And you, if you were me in that moment, what would you do? Stay silent, or make sure they heard your name like I did? A pause. Then another message. "Captain Rivera confirms. Executing owner on board announcement." I inhaled. Everything was smooth and clean, no yelling, no proving, just one command. I moved to a different gate with a shareholder monitor. On my phone, I opened Cabin Feed, the special owner feature that lets you listen to the public cabin audio. I put on my headphones, leaned back, eyes calm. A woman's voice came through lead flight attendant, polite as always. "Welcome aboard Sky Harbor Flight 218 to Maui." I could picture Savannah reclining in her seat, smug smile, ordering white wine. Michael next to her, eyes glued to his phone, avoiding his wife's gaze. And Aunt Cole busy taking photos for social media, showing off the Avery family vacation. A few quiet minutes. The engine started to hum. At exactly 10:28, the captain's voice came over the speakers, low, clear, commanding. "Good day, ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rivera. Before departure, we'd like to extend a special greeting to Mrs. Gloria Avery, owner of Sky Harbor Airways, who has supported us throughout our growth. It's an honor to serve you today." He paused, then the airline's signature music played, polished, familiar, shimmering through my headphones. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I saw Savannah's face freeze in business class, her wine glass stopping mid-air, Michael turning, flustered, lips moving with no sound. Aunt Cole, the woman who took my seat, asking, "Wait, who's the owner?" A smile touched my lips. Not a victorious grin, but the smile of someone who endured a lifetime and finally saw justice without a courtroom. In my ears, whispers rose, passengers murmuring, a few claps. The attendant said something about safety, but I'd stopped listening. I took off the headphones and let the sounds dissolve. My phone buzzed non-stop. First text from Michael. "Mom? What's going on? They just said your name on the PA." Second one, a few minutes later. "Mom, are you joking?" Savannah says it must be a mistake. Then Savannah, Mom, there must be some misunderstanding. I think the airline got the name wrong. Let's not confuse the press. That little emoji made me chuckle sweetness to the bitter end. I typed one word, later, and turned off notifications. A Sky Harbor staffer called Professional Voice. Mrs. Avery, the owner announcement has been executed. The captain sends his regards. Do you have any requests for the special passengers? I looked out the glass at the plane rolling down the runway. Light rain started, tiny drops spreading across the clear pane. I spoke slowly. Yes, I want every business class service on that flight tagged courtesy of GA, from wine and meals to the resort lounge at arrival, and make sure they know who GA is. The agent sounded slightly surprised, but stayed calm. Yes, ma'am. We'll take care of it right away. I hung up and leaned back in my seat. In the distance, the engine started to spool up, the sound deepening and growing stronger. The plane slowly lifted off the ground, carrying with it 3 people who thought they could decide my place in this life. Outside, the leaden sky began to tear open in patches, revealing a few floating streaks of light. The rain kept falling, but finer now, gentler. I sat still, watching the plane until it was just a silver dot in the clouds. A strange calm spread through me, as if the weight of all those years of silence and endurance had dropped away in that moment. No anger, no gloating, just lightness, light enough that I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and steady. A middle-aged woman next to me noticed my smile and asked softly, "Which flight are you on? You look so happy." I shook my head and smiled. "I'm not flying. I'm just seeing a few relatives off." She nodded and didn't ask more. I packed up my things and rolled my suitcase toward the exit. Behind me, the airport announcements kept droning, calling out flights and passenger names. I moved through the crowd, feeling all the noise melt away behind me. Outside, the rain had eased. The air smelled like wet asphalt and carried a clean, cool breeze. I opened my umbrella and walked slowly to the taxi stand. Dim lights shimmered on the pavement like streaks from old memories. A taxi pulled up, and the driver dipped his head. "Where to, ma'am?" "Home," I said softly. Then I paused, thought for a moment. "No, the Sunrise Cafe on Pine Avenue." He nodded, and the car rolled forward. I looked out the window, Seattle drifting backward, buildings fading in the mist. Inside, there was no hollow left by being abandoned. Only the sense that, for the first time in years, I could see myself standing tall. I opened my phone and went back into the Sky Harbor app. Under the flight list, a small line appeared. Flight SH-218 status, in air. Owner acknowledgement completed. Right below it, an internal note popped up. Business class courtesy upgraded under Directive GA. I tapped the line, then turned off the screen. No need to see more. It was enough. Thomas used to say, "A smart person's justice is making the wrongdoer hear your name over the loudspeaker." Now I understood. Outside, the last raindrop slid off the car window, and inside me, another kind of rain came to an end too. I looked up. The sky was still gray, but it no longer felt heavy. I smiled faintly and whispered, "Do you see that, Thomas? I don't need to fly high. I just need them to know who owns this sky." By the time I got home, Seattle's rain had stopped. Late afternoon light leaked through the blinds, pooling into pale gold streaks across the hardwood floor. The house was quiet, as if it were listening. I hung up my coat, set the suitcase by the sofa, and went straight to the United bedroom. The oak wardrobe was still there, just like when Thomas was alive. I opened it, and the familiar scent rushed out: the old soap, the wool sweater he wore in the yard when he fixed the mower. I brushed my fingers over the gray knit, slightly pilled, and it felt like touching a memory. All these years I'd thought if I lost Thomas, I couldn't go on. But standing at the closet now, I knew. He was still here not for me to cry, but for me to choose. I didn't cry. I just said it softly, like a promise. I'll go, Thomas. But this time, not for anyone else, just for me. I left the room, made a ginger tea, then called June. June, I want to go somewhere, I said when she picked up. Where? Maui, or chasing Savannah's plane? She teased. I laughed. No, I want to go, but for myself, no one tagging along. She was quiet for a beat, then said gently, So, you finally started living for real. That afternoon, I got a call from Victor Lang. He asked for an online meeting to present the new quarterly financials and an expansion proposal. I agreed. On screen, Victor spoke in his steady tone. Mrs. Avery, Sky Harbor is preparing to launch European routes. The board wants the controlling shareholder's name on the project. They're asking you to confirm or delegate. I looked at the figures: revenue, dividends, growth charts. I knew little about the technical side, but I understood the weight of a decision better than anyone. I said, Send me the documents. I'll sign. An hour later, the e-file landed in my inbox. I signed my name, Gloria Avery, with a firm hand, like closing one chapter and opening another. Victor smiled, voice light but touched. Thomas always said the day you signed your first document would be the day Sky Harbor truly had a soul. I think he was right. I glanced at the window, glinting with late light, clouds drifting slow. No, Victor, today is the day I started to have a soul. After the 10 meeting, I asked Sky Harbor to schedule an executive-level training on airline governance for owners, not to run the company, but to understand the world my husband once lived in. I didn't want to just inherit. I wanted to be worthy. That night, I sat at my desk and stared at our yellowed wedding photo. My 22-year-old smile was still bright, and Thomas looked at me with absolute ease. I opened my laptop and created a new bank account, the Second Wind Fund. This small fund had a simple purpose: to help women over 60, those dismissed, forgotten, or treated as burdens by their own families, catch a second wind in life. A modest start, but I knew it would grow, not by money alone, but by meaning. I wrote in the fund description, No one is too old to deserve respect. No one is too late to begin again. When I finished, I felt lighter, like layers of heaviness in my chest were being gently unbuckled. The next morning, I decided to change everything. I went to the phone store, bought a new device, and changed my number. I left the family group chat on the old phone and muted notifications from Michael and Savannah. I wasn't erasing them from my life, but I needed to silence the noise that had worn me down. I opened a fresh contacts list, just a few names: June, Victor, my law office, and a travel agent. I set a soft ringtone, opened my calendar, and made plans. That's when I decided, if I've spent a lifetime waiting for others to invite me, from now on I'll send the tickets to myself. I opened a map. My eyes stopped on Paris, a place Thomas and I dreamed of but never saw. From Paris, a line to Venice, then Kyoto, Santorini, and finally Sedona, the red rock land in Arizona, where sunsets burn like a promise. I called the travel agent. I'd like to book a round-the-world trip, departing in 2 weeks, 1 passenger. The agent asked, What cabin class would you like, ma'am? I smiled. Business class. Courtesy of G.A. We both laughed. I knew I was stepping into a new chapter, one with no room left for asking permission. That evening, June came by with a bottle of red. Heard you're about to circle the globe? I nodded and poured 2 glasses. Yes, and I need a companion, at least for the first leg. June laughed out loud. Then Venice it is. I can take 2 weeks off. I want to see you step off a plane with sunlight on your face and not a hint of sadness. I clinked glasses with her, my voice trembling. Warm. Thank you, June. You've always seen me even when I couldn't see myself. That night, after June left, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. The warm light framed a face with lines around the eyes and silver in the hair. But the look in my eyes was different. Something I'd lost years ago and finally found again. Aliveness. I stared long enough that tears came not from sorrow but from gratitude. I'd lived my whole life for others now. For the first time, I was living for me. I kept the old phone in a drawer. The notification light blinked. I opened it. 10 missed calls from Michael, 3 voice messages from Savannah. The first was Michael, voice shaky. Mom, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't think you'd be hurt like that. I was scared to fight with Savannah. The second was Savannah, trying to sound gentle. Mom, I'm sorry. It was all a misunderstanding. I didn't know the airline would say your name like that. Please don't be mad, okay? I listened to them all, then deleted. Not out of anger, just because I didn't need explanations anymore. Some chapters are best closed in silence. I stepped out to the porch. The last of the jasmine scented the air. Seattle at night felt unusually still. I looked up. Clouds parted to show a handful of small stars. Tomorrow, I'd stop by Sky Harbor's office, sign the second wind paperwork, then visit a tailor for a few new outfits. Nothing flashy, just enough to feel beautiful. In my own way. I thought of Thomas. If he were here, he'd say, "You've been piloting the flight plan all along, you just didn't know it." I smiled and placed a hand over my heart, whispering, "You were right. I'm not just surviving. I'm flying." In the mirror, that woman looked back, silver-touched hair, bright eyes, straight shoulders, and a peaceful smile. No longer the mother crossed off a list. No longer the enduring widow, but Gloria Avery, who stepped from endurance to agency, from silence to voice, from the past to herself. Paris welcomed me with the smell of croissants, the click of shoes on damp sidewalks, and windows overflowing with geraniums. I arrived on an early fall morning, just after the rain, the air tasting like melted butter. My little hotel on Rue Saint-Germain wasn't fancy, but the third-floor room had a balcony over the Seine, close enough to hear the water and feel the chill threading my silver hair. On day 1, I went to the orangery. In the oval room, Monet's water lilies wrapped the walls, soft blues and purples breathing with the viewers. I stood still. My whole life, I'd cried from pain, loss, and hurt. This time, my tears fell for a different reason, because I was allowed to be happy, allowed to exist with no excuse. I sat on a wooden bench under the muted light. A young woman beside me asked in French, "Are you okay?" I smiled and answered in English, "I'm fine. I'm just learning how to breathe again." That evening, I ate alone by the river, white wine and grilled salmon. When the server set it down, I snapped a photo and sent it to June. I just had dinner with myself and didn't feel lonely. She replied almost instantly, "You're living right now, Gloria." In Venice, I met June. The city felt like a dream melting into water. We rented a small flat near Street Marks, and each morning we watched gondolas glide by, songs drifting in the air. One afternoon, a shopkeeper tried to sell me a silk scarf at triple price. I smiled and shook my head. "No, Grazi." Saying no was easy, but inside it felt like freedom. For years, I didn't know how to say no. I agreed to everything to keep peace, to avoid trouble, to not bother anyone. In Venice, I learned to say no to the voice in my head, the one that said I was old, that what I did no longer mattered. I told it no, then laughed as my voice echoed down a narrow alley folding into the slap of water. June grinned. "You know, Gloria, no is one of adulthood's prettiest words." I nodded. And maybe the word we women spend a lifetime learning to say. Kyoto was another world. Maple leaves were turning, temples washed in orange and gold. I stayed at a ryokan where they taught me to bow at the door and say arigato with a quiet heart. Every morning, I meditated in a tiny garden, listening to water drip from bamboo. One breeze scattered a few maple leaves into the pond. I suddenly heard Thomas's laugh, low, warm, like a cello. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in years, I forgave myself for staying silent too long, for letting others decide my worth, for mistaking endurance for kindness. I spoke softly, both confession and promise. Gloria, you won't be quiet anymore. On my last day in Kyoto, I left a card by a Buddha statue at Kiyomizu. Thank you for teaching me that peace doesn't come from others, it comes from my breath. Santorini felt made for healing. Sky and sea were one. From my balcony, I looked down on white houses stacked on the cliff and watched the sun dust the water with light like someone salting wounds and stitching them with gold. June and I sat together with chilled wine. She told me about her 32-year marriage betrayal, years of endurance, and a late divorce at 60. You know, she said, divorce isn't a period, it's a comma before a comeback chapter. I smiled. You just redefined happiness, June. We clinked glasses and promised to live loud for the rest of it. That night I wrote, I used to live in other people's homes, to the rhythm of their hearts. Now I live in my own space, and my heartbeat is the sound of waves. The last stop was Sedona, Arizona, red, dry, still like a meditation. I chose it to pause and write. Every morning, I opened the window and breathed in the sandstone air. Cathedral Rock was right there. People said a vortex ran through it, helping you find balance. I set my laptop on the porch and began a guide called Passport at 64. Not a travel manual, but a soul's itinerary for older women finding their freedom again. I wrote, no one has to play the saintly mom forever. No one needs permission to be joyful, and no one gets to declare you past your time but you. June read as she sipped coffee. You know, Gloria, she said, if Thomas could see you now, he'd be so proud. I smiled, eyes stinging. Not if. I think he's watching. We stayed another week. At night, two women in their 60s sat by a small fire, traded life stories, laughed until we cried. Under a sky full of stars, we made a promise. We won't live small for even one more day. When I returned to Seattle, the media had started saying the name Gloria Avery. An article was being shared online. The discreet owner of Sky Harbor launches the Second Wind Fund, helping older women reclaim freedom and dignity. I read it without pride, just peace. For the first time, I wasn't Michael Avery's mom or Thomas Avery's widow. I was myself, my inbox filled with thank yous from everywhere. A 67-year-old woman in Florida wrote, Miss Gloria, your story helped me walk out of a 30-year unhappy marriage. Another in Texas wrote, I applied for a job again after seeing the news about Second Wind. Thank you for giving me courage. I read every line, tears falling light. I realized, retaliation never heals like freedom. Only when you are truly free do the wounds close quietly. That night I sat at my table, opened a sheet of stationery, and wrote to myself, Gloria, if one day you feel bored or lonely, remember you once flew. Don't go back to the old chair just because it's familiar. That chair was never yours. The world is wide, and there are still so many horizons to breathe. From you, the one who found the sky again. I folded the paper into Passport at 64 and smiled. Outside, Seattle's night was clear. A Sky Harbor plane crossed my window, its lights blinking against the sky. I watched it and felt calm. I knew I was no longer just a passenger. I held the flight path of my own life. The call came on a Monday morning. I just poured my coffee, sunlight slipping through the blinds and laying golden bands across the kitchen table. The phone buzzed, and the screen read, Michael International Call. I stood still for a few seconds. It had been over 3 months since that defining flight. I no longer waited, and I wasn't angry. There was only a quiet calm like a lake after a storm. I picked up. Michael's voice came through, weak and crackling with static. "Mom, I'm sorry." I stayed silent. The kind of silence from someone who's heard too many apologies without action. He drew a breath, voice shakier. "I know I was wrong. I should have told Savannah that you were part of the trip. I didn't have the courage." I was about to answer when another voice cut in clear, smooth, and cold. "Hi, Mom. It's me, Savannah. I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were only worried about your health. That itinerary was really demanding, Mom. Hiking, boating, lots of activities. I didn't want you to get tired." I closed my eyes and inhaled. The way she spoke sounded like a presentation, every word sugar-coated, with a bitter aftertaste. I asked slowly, "Savannah, if I were poor and not a Sky Harbor shareholder, would you too be making this call?" A long silence. I could hear Michael's breathing on the line, and then nothing from either of them. Like I had opened a door they were afraid to look through. I went on. "The answer's already in that silence. I'm not blaming you. I just see clearly." Savannah gave a small laugh with that professional tone she uses when she wants to control the situation. "How about we schedule a family meeting, Mom? To reset expectations and understand each other better. I think a meeting would help us start fresh." I let out a short laugh, not loud, just a breath slicing the air. "Reset expectations? You're talking like you're running a company, not talking to your mother-in-law." Savannah's voice rose a notch. "I just want things to be professional, not emotional." I answered, "That's the problem, Savannah. Families don't need to be professional. Families need to be real." On the other end, Michael slipped in, voice small, like he was afraid. "Mom, honestly, I should have said this long ago. Savannah just didn't want you encroaching on our space. She needs privacy." I sat down and kept my voice even. "Your son's space has never been taken by me. Do you know what that space is made of? It's built from my heart. You're the one who left it empty, not anyone else." Michael stayed quiet. I could hear a dry swallow on the line, then a long breath, like a plea without words. Savannah cut in again, her voice tightening. "I think you're mixing feelings with power. You're a shareholder, we know that. But you shouldn't use that to make us feel small." I closed my eyes and smiled lightly. "No, Savannah, I'm not abusing power. I'm learning boundaries. I used to let you cross every line, my voice, my time, my dignity. Now I'm putting the fence back up. That's not power, that's clarity." She paused, then gave a forced laugh. "You seem to have changed a lot." "Yes," I said, "because I finally realized respect isn't negotiable. It only exists when both sides understand its value." Michael spoke softly. "I just want you to forgive me. I miss you, honestly." His voice softened me a little. Michael was never cruel, just weak. And my whole life, I'd fed that weakness with too much grace. "I've already forgiven you," I said. "But going back, no, we won't be the old version of family. If we talk again, it'll only be with a family therapist present. I don't want us sliding into the same loop." Savannah sounded surprised. "You're serious? We need a professional just to talk at home?" I answered gently, "Not to protect me from you, to protect me from my own habit of shrinking." Another silence stretched out. I heard the ocean in the background. They were probably in Maui. Wind mingled with their breathing. Then Savannah chuckled, half mocking. "Wow, you're like peak modern feminist now. You talk like a TED Talk." I laughed back. "Thanks, I do like learning. But I'm still the same person, just no longer asking permission to be respected." Michael asked quietly. "Mom, I just want to know, are you still mad?" I thought for a few seconds, then answered honestly, "No, anger means you're still hoping someone will change. I just won't invest more emotion where there's no return." Both of them were silent. I stood and stepped onto the porch, looking at Seattle's clear sky. Swallows flew low. The breeze carried the smell of grass after rain. I spoke softly, almost a whisper. "Michael, I want you to be happy, but happiness can't be built on someone else's silence. I've been silent long enough, and that's enough." Then I ended with one last line, light but firm. "This conversation stops here. When you're truly ready to talk, not to justify or bargain, I'll listen." I hung up. The phone screen went dark, reflecting my face in the glass, calm, steady. Wind slipped through the porch, carrying jasmine from the backyard. I stood there for a while, then smiled. Not a winner's smile, but the smile of someone who just set the final brick in her own boundary wall. Inside, the kettle clicked. I poured another cup of tea, sat at the table, took out Passport at 64, opened to a fresh page, and wrote, "Today, I didn't get angry, didn't resent, and didn't wait to be understood. I simply stopped at the right time. Respect isn't a commodity to haggle over, it's breath, and I'm breathing deeply." I set the pen down and looked toward the window. Sunlight shimmered on the tabletop like ripples. I knew somewhere out there they were talking, maybe angry, maybe ashamed. But it no longer mattered. I had taken another step out of the old circle where people call it family but leave no room for respect, and outside that circle, the sky was still blue, wide, and mine. I returned to Seattle on a gray day, rain falling light as chalk dust. The city was the same, always half awake, half dreaming. But I wasn't. In my suitcase, along with clothes and Passport at 64, I carried a new version of myself, clear, calm, and aware of the value of stopping at the right time. I'd agreed to meet Michael and Savannah, not at home or a cafe, but at the office of an attorney who's also a family therapist, Rebecca Hall. I wanted the meeting guided by someone who could separate feelings from responsibility, tears from action. That morning, I arrived 10 minutes early. The room sat in a red brick building downtown, with big windows facing a park. Rebecca greeted me with a steady smile. "Mrs. Avery, are you ready?" I nodded. "I'm not here for reconciliation. I'm here for clarity." Rebecca smiled. "Good. That's the only foundation for real peace." Michael arrived first. He looked thinner, eyes sunken, hair messy. He glanced at me, hesitated, then said softly, "Mom." I nodded. "Have a seat, Michael." In that moment, there was no anger between us, just the empty space of years of not speaking plainly. 15 minutes later, Savannah walked in. Sunglasses, white coat, a confidence like she was here for an interview, not a mediation. She spoke quickly. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was awful." Rebecca gestured to the chair across from me. "It's fine. Shall we begin?" I opened my folder, voice calm but clear. "Today, I want to present 3 things, the reasons this relationship broke. 1. The timeline of insults. 2. The exclusion pattern. 3. The manipulation disguised as what's appropriate." Savannah arched a brow. "Appropriate?" I looked straight at her. "Yes. Every time you said, 'Mom isn't appropriate,' Mom would get tired. Let us decide. You were drawing a circle and pushing me out of it. That's not care. That's calculated exclusion." The room's energy dipped. Michael lowered his head, hands nodded. Rebecca sat still, taking notes. I continued. "Savannah, I don't need you to like me. I just need to be treated like someone who matters. And Michael, I don't need you to defend me. I need you to have a spine." Rebecca looked up, voice gentle but firm. "Savannah, your turn. I want you to apologize. No justification. No but." Savannah blinked, thrown. She glanced at Michael, exhaled, and spoke quickly. "I'm sorry, if you felt hurt. But," Rebecca raised a hand. "No, I said no, but. Try again. Savannah pressed her lips together and took off the sunglasses. Her eyes were red and dull, not from crying, but from lack of sleep. I am sorry for hurting you. Short words, heavy sound. I nodded. Thank you, that's enough. Then I opened the second document. Now, the new rules. I read slowly, point by point. 1. I will not take on any tasks related to your household, childcare, or managing your property. 2. All visits will be scheduled, no drop-ins, no midnight video calls. 3. No one speaks for me, decides for me, or uses my name for financial or social matters. 4. If any rule is broken, I will pause contact for 90 days. 5. Everyone signs, so respect becomes action, not a feeling. Savannah let out a dry laugh. You're turning family into a contract? I answered immediately. No, I'm turning respect into responsibility so it doesn't get swallowed by the habit of dismissing me. Rebecca slid the paper to the center of the table. This isn't legally binding. It's a moral agreement. You can both sign if you agree. Savannah stared at it, smiling stiffly. Michael looked down. After a moment, he picked up the pen and signed first, his hand slightly shaking. I don't know where to start, but you deserve this. Savannah hesitated, then signed too. I didn't need words. That signature, just dry ink, was the final boundary between past and present. The air in the room lightened a little. I gathered the pages and slipped them into my bag. Michael looked at me, voice rough. I chose comfort over what's right, Mom. I was afraid of losing peace. But in the end, I lost you. I looked at my son, the man I once carried in my arms, shielded from the first snows. I spoke slowly, without reproach. You only repeated what I did my whole life, choosing calm over truth. Now you know, calm isn't always peace. He nodded, tears falling. I handed him a tissue and said softly, I forgive you, Michael, but I don't forget. Forgiveness is to lighten me, not to help you skip the lesson. Savannah stayed quiet, eyes shifting away. Rebecca watched, then closed. We can't fix the past, but we can define the future. Mrs. Avery, you did what very few dare to do. Reset order in a relationship they thought was untouchable. I smiled. Slightly. I didn't do it to win. I did it so I'd stop losing to myself. The session ended. When we stepped outside, Seattle's rain still sifted down. Little drops dotted my hair, cold but gentle. Michael opened an umbrella, trying to cover me, but I raised a hand. No need, son. I want to feel it. We walked slowly through the fine rain. Savannah followed, saying nothing. I didn't know what she was thinking, but for the first time, she wasn't leading, she was following. At the garage, Michael turned and asked softly, Mom, would you come to Lily's birthday next month? Not as someone's grandma, just as my mom. I looked at him and smiled. If everything in the agreement holds, I'll come, and I'll bring cake. He nodded, smiling through tears. Savannah stayed silent. But I saw something soften in her eyes, not exactly remorse, but awareness. And that was enough. I turned and walked to my car. The rain picked up, tapping my coat, seeping into my skin. I lifted my head to Seattle's pale gray sky, the smell of damp earth in the air. Maybe this was a new kind of baptism, not with holy water, but with rain. No one granting blessings, just me washing off years of being dismissed. I smiled, opened the car door and whispered, At last, Thomas, I've set things in order, not in their house, but in my heart. The sky answered with distant thunder, low and warm. And inside me, a chapter closed not with a slammed door, but with the gentle sound of rain. The next spring, Seattle ran warmer than usual. Cherry trees bloomed early, their petals falling on the paths like little letters from time. I still lived in the same old house, but each morning when I woke, the emptiness was gone. On my desk, amid stacks of papers and notebooks, a small sign read, "Second Wind, the second breath of growing older." Second Wind officially expanded 6 months after it launched. June and I turned my old living room into a temporary office with a wall of photos of women in the program: mothers, widows, retired teachers, factory workers, even some abandoned by their own families. Every face was a story, and I knew when they came to us, what they needed wasn't money, it was to be heard. We started with a 3-part mentoring program: finance, legal, and mental health. Finance taught them to manage their own retirement money and avoid being exploited or taken. Legal guided them through ownership rights, wills, and how to report abuse. And mental health, that's where we cried together, laughed together, and remembered dreams that had been shelved. I still remember the first meeting. A woman named Marlene stood up, hands trembling but eyes bright. "I'm 72, and for the first time in my life, I opened a bank account in my own name." The whole room clapped, then burst into tears. June leaned toward me and whispered, "Gloria, you didn't just start a fund. You started a movement." That same year, Sky Harbor funded an academic program called the Thomas Avery Chair, Ethics in Governance and Human Legacy. When Victor asked me to unveil it, I was quiet for a long time. "Do you want his name tied to Sky Harbor forever?" Victor asked. I answered, voice tight but steady, "I want people to remember him not just as an engineer or a shareholder, but as a man who believed ethics could be an airplane's engine, too." The ceremony took place in the main hall, before hundreds of employees. When the plaque reading, "Thomas Avery Chair of Ethics" was revealed, it felt like the sky in my chest opened. Then the speaking invite started. At first, small talks at community centers, then workshops, TV programs, even an international conference on age and human value. I'm not a fiery speaker. I just talk about what I've lived. At one Chicago talk, I told a room mostly full of older women, "Age isn't a reason to stop living. Age measures how many times you've stood back up." I used to think being accepted by my children was the finish line. Now I know the finish line is myself. The room stood and applauded like waves. I saw June in the last row, wiping tears. June now runs all communications for Second Wind. She turns our members' stories into a short doc-series called Dignity in the Later Years. Each episode slices real life. A woman learning to drive at 68, a grandmother filing to reclaim her house, someone once banned from going out by her daughter-in-law, now working as a small tour guide. After 3 months online, followers multiplied by 10. Many women messaged, "I thought I was the only one," June said. "See, Gloria, when one person dares to tell it, thousands get saved." One morning, while reviewing emails, I saw the latest report. Family SOS Hotline, 2,037 calls in just 3 months. That hotline, set up by Second Wind, gives isolated or abused older adults a place to reach out. More than half the calls came just to say one thing: "I want someone to hear me." We connected them with attorneys, counselors, and sometimes simply sent a coffee voucher with a note. "You are not invisible." One day, I got an invitation from a documentary team. They wanted to make a film called "The Sky Belongs to Her," about my journey from being pushed off a flight to becoming a symbol of late-found freedom. I read the letter, then called back. "I agree, but only on one condition." "What condition, Mrs. Avery?" the young director asked on the line. "Respect older characters. Don't turn us into cheap inspiration. Let the audience see that wrinkles have the right to be beautiful." The director went quiet for a moment, then said, "I promise." The film screened at the Toronto Film Festival the following year. I didn't attend, just watched through a live stream. When the final title appeared on the screen, "Dedicated to the women who I tame stay, I learned to take off again in their 60s, I cried, not because I was being honored, but because I knew Thomas was smiling somewhere. Michael started changing too. He began individual therapy on Rebecca's suggestion, learning to take responsibility instead of just apologizing. One afternoon he called me, calm voice. "I'm trying to understand you, Mom. Not to please you, but to understand why you're so strong." Savannah sent a letter as well, no frills, just this. "I'm taking a class on boundaries in relationships. Maybe you were right. Love doesn't exist without respect." I finished reading and didn't reply right away. But that night, I placed a hand on my chest and silently thanked life that the cycle of hurt had finally stopped spinning. In my free days, I kept writing the extended section of Passport at 64. The new chapter was titled, "Family Isn't a Place Where Anyone Gets to Belittle Anyone," I wrote. "If someone uses the label family to hurt you, remember, blood is not a binding contract. A real family is where people treat each other with respect, not endurance." When I finished the last sentence, the afternoon sun lit up the desk, washing the page in a soft glow. I knew I had closed a part of my life not with anger, but with gratitude. One morning, while checking the mail, I found a hand-addressed envelope from Kansas. Inside was a small sheet of paper. In a young hand, "Mrs. Gloria, thank you. Because of your video, I helped my grandma get out of financial abuse. She says she wants to live 10 more years so she can be her own person one last time. I think she found her second wind. Ellie 19. I held the letter, my chest tight. Outside, sparrows chattered along the eaves. I said softly to myself, "Thomas, do you see? Your legacy is blooming not in money, but in human dignity." I placed the letter in a frame and hung it right under our old photo. Light bounced off the glass, glimmering like silver wings. I smiled, closed my eyes, and whispered, "This sky finally means something." 2 years passed since that rainy morning at the lawyer's office. I'm 66 now. More gray in my hair, but bright and soft like moonlit threads. Old friends say I look younger, maybe because I stopped straining to please anyone. I still fly not to escape, but to arrive. I choose short trips to small American cities, Santa Fe, Asheville, Portland, then back to Seattle. Each destination no longer means running from, but returning to my true self, to a life with rhythm, peace, and freedom. One autumn morning, while having coffee at a small cafe near Lake Union, Michael walked in. No longer the hesitant boy from 2 years ago, he had changed more, grounded, quieter. He pulled out a chair across from me and smiled a little. "Mom, I booked a table at the old restaurant for lunch. Want to go?" I nodded, my heart light as a falling leaf. Since our family therapy session, we'd met regularly once a month, sometimes just for coffee, without revisiting the past. Michael no longer apologized or tried to prove anything. He simply showed up. Over lunch, we talked like two adults. Weather, work, the Second Wind Fund, the documentary that had just been re-aired. Midway through, Michael looked up. "Mom, I've never said this, but thank you for not giving up on me." I smiled and laid my hand on the table. "I only let go of what makes me smaller, Michael. You make me grow." He laughed, eyes shining behind his glasses. It was the first time I saw my son without fear. A few weeks later, I got a text from Savannah. Short, "Can I see you? Just us, not to talk about the past. I want to be honest this time." I hesitated. Then one afternoon I agreed. We chose a small tea shop by Lake Washington, quiet place, just the breeze moving the curtains and a hint of jasmine. Savannah arrived on time. No sunglasses, no executive armor. She wore a beige sweater, hair low and simple. When she saw me, she dipped her head slightly. "Thank you for coming," I smiled. "The tea here is great. You should try the white tea." As the cups were poured, she looked up, her voice gone husky. "I want to apologize again, Mom. But this time, without conditions." I said nothing. I just looked at her, not judging, not soothing. She took a breath and went on. "I used to be afraid of losing my husband, afraid Michael loved you more than me, so I built fences thicker and thicker until they became walls. I thought I was protecting my marriage, but I was actually pushing my husband away and hurting the one person who never tried to take anything from me. I set my cup down, steady voice. Savannah, everyone has fear, but fear doesn't give you the right to step on someone else to stand tall. The more fences you build, the lonelier you become in your own house. She lowered her head, eyes wet. I know. I'm still in therapy. Rebecca's helping me see that control is just another way to hide from insecurity. I nodded. Good. Keep going. I don't need you to be perfect. I just need you to be real. Savannah looked up, eyes sincere. I want a do-over. Not to fix my image, but to have a normal relationship without defense. I smiled. The door is always open, but the frame stays. I'll welcome you, as long as we both understand the boundaries. In that moment, with warm tea scent in the air, I felt something loosen, not forgiveness, but acceptance. No one had to win. We just had to be ourselves. When we said goodbye, Savannah hugged me lightly. For the first time, it wasn't awkward or transactional. She simply whispered, "Thank you for not locking the door forever." I laughed. I locked it, but I didn't throw away the key. In the days that followed, I went back to work at Second Wind. In 2 years, the fund has helped more than 1,000 women. Half of them not only regained control of their finances, they returned to an old love, themselves. A 72-year-old opened a bakery, a 65-year-old learned to dance, an 80-year-old divorced to travel freely. They call us the ground crew, the people who teach them to take off without leaving the earth. I often share a little line at each talk. Happiness isn't someone keeping you. It's knowing you can leave any time without losing yourself. That line spread on social media, then ended up on the cover of a magazine for older women. I just smiled. I never meant to be a symbol. I'm simply a mother who learned to stop waiting. One late winter day, I boarded a plane again. Flight number SH1109 Seattle to Santa Barbara. As I stepped into first class, a flight attendant smiled. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Avery. We're honored to have Sky Harbor's owner with us today." It didn't move me the way it did the first time, but it warmed me. I sat down, buckled in, and looked out the window. The western sky glowed gold, layered clouds, sunlight glinting on the wing like a bright blade. The cabin speakers chimed, the captain's familiar voice. "On behalf of the entire Sky Harbor crew, we want to thank Mrs. Gloria Avery for joining us on today's flight." Light applause rippled through the cabin. I smiled, not a victor's smile. The smile of someone who has passed through humiliation, anger, and loneliness, and now stands steady inside herself, with nothing left to prove. The plane lifted off. Seattle shrank beneath us, then disappeared into cloud. I thought of Michael, of Savannah, of the women who'd come to me in tears. I thought of Thomas, the man who believed I would be okay if he went first. And he was right. The sky doesn't change. Still blue, still deep, still far. But I have changed. I'm no longer the woman with a suitcase, standing silent at the airport, erased from a list. I'm the one who rewrote that list with my life. I closed my eyes, leaned back, and listened to the steady engine like a heartbeat. In that moment, I knew no destination matters more than the peace inside. The season of fruit had ripened, and I was tasting my own sweetness. Late afternoon, San Juan's sky wore a pale honey tint, the kind of light that only shows up at the end of a long journey. I sat on the deck of a small chartered yacht, a birthday gift to myself at 66, and wrote the final lines of Passport at 64. The pages fluttered in the wind, salt and damp wood mingling in the air, like the sea was reading along. June sat beside me, reading glasses low on her nose, her voice soft as she read my closing line out loud. "Freedom isn't a finish line, it's a craft you practice every day." She looked up, smiling, eyes shiny. Perfect, Gloria, you finished. I shook my head, smiling. No, June, we've only just started living. A breeze lifted my hair. The phone on the table buzzed. The screen lit up. A text from Savannah. She sent a photo of a dinner table, cream ceramic plates, low candles, and a small line. Mom, I cooked this dinner for you. I hope you like it. See you Friday? I looked at the screen for a long time. Maybe for the first time in years, I saw sincerity in that candlelight, not performance. I typed back, short, "See you Friday. I'll bring tea." Wind moved across the deck, carrying salt and the rhythm of waves. I closed the notebook gently, a warm feeling rising through me. No more bitterness, no more hate, just a quiet calm in my chest like the sea after a storm. I leaned back and looked up at the night coming on. Stars flickered like dots marking the route I'd traveled from Gate B12 that day, where I was cut from a family trip, to this moment, sitting in the middle of the ocean, taking off again by myself. I thought, without that humiliation, I might never have. I found myself. If I hadn't been erased from the list, I wouldn't have known I could rewrite it with the strength of my own self-respect. I opened my laptop and wrote an email to Victor Lang, the quiet partner through these years. Victor, I want to start the Second Wind Pilot Scholarship for women over 50 who want to learn to fly. Help them take off, even once, so they know the sky is still open to all of us. I hit send. A soft ding sounded the click that shut the door on my last hesitations. June poured more tea, eyes on the horizon. Do you still miss Thomas? I smiled, looking out. Always. But now, I don't miss him with tears. I miss him by living large the way he wanted. A salty wind rushed in, carrying the scent of the ocean, of freedom, and of old seasons fading. I stood and leaned on the railing, watching the moon shimmer on the waves. The sea doesn't ask about the past or demand the future. It just rocks, as if saying, "Breathe, Gloria, you're home now." I closed my eyes, listened to the surf, and felt my heart as quiet as dawn water. All my life, I thought happiness was someone holding my hand through the storm. Now I know real happiness is when you can stand in the storm and smile. I went back inside, brewed a small pot of tea. Warm light pooled across the cozy cabin. I opened my laptop and wrote thank you notes to those who believed in me, to the women who wrote letters, who called the Second Wind hotline, who offered up a piece of their pain so the light could slip in. "Thank you for not giving up," I wrote. "Your stories are the map that led me back to myself." I paused, listening to the tea simmer, jasmine scent drifting. I knew the storm season of my life had truly passed. That night before sleep, I stepped onto the deck once more. The sea was black and star-strewn. I spoke softly, as if the wind might miss it. "Thomas, I've lived large like you wanted, and maybe tomorrow I'll live even. Larger." I smiled, knowing every journey, even one born in hurt, can end in light, if you're brave enough to keep walking. I sipped my tea and watched the moon spread silver on the water. The wind kept blowing, the waves kept rolling, but inside me, everything was calm. Maybe life is like a flight, delays, detours, storms, and in the end, you still land where you most needed to be, yourself. And if you're still lost in your own storm, please believe the sky has never closed. It's just waiting for you to look up again. If you've stayed with me this far, I'm truly grateful. Tell me where you're watching from, maybe a quiet kitchen, a late afternoon porch, or just a pause in the middle of a busy day. Because sometimes a single comment from you can be a small light for someone who needs a bit of hope. If this story made you feel warmer or stronger, please like, subscribe, and stay for the next journeys. Every word you leave, every little under this video, is a shared heartbeat reminding us we're still flying together in the wide sky of those who were once forgotten but never stopped wanting to live.